Good evening, and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the governing body on planning items. Please note that the governing body rules state that public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the Planning Commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the governing body. Tonight's cases are tentatively scheduled to be heard by the governing body next month. Agendas can be found at topeka.org. Some of tonight's cases involve public hearings. For those cases, the procedure will be as follows. First, the planning department staff will summarize the case. Next, we will hear from the applicant or their representative. Then we will receive public testimony. Comments will be limited to 4 minutes. For agenda items that do not involve public hearings, public comment is allowed provided the person has signed up on Topeka Speaks or has notified staff prior to 5 p.m. today. Comments are limited to 4 minutes. Finally, at the end of the regular business, the commission will entertain general comment regarding matters relating to the commission business, provided the person has signed up on Topeka Speaks or has notified staff prior to 5 p.m. today. Comments are limited to 4 minutes. Amanda, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean.
Here.
Ms. Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Kaut.
Here.
Mr. Nager.
Here.
Ms. Pearson.
Here.
And Ms. Hannon. Here. We have enough for a quorum.
Thank you. Are there, one moment. Gotta get to that. Is there any, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, or is there any comment on the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Amanda, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Ms. Hannon.
Aye.
Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Mr. Kaut.
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
And Mr. Nager.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Are there any declarations of conflict of interest or ex parte communications by the member of the commission?
Madam Chair, I'm going to step out of number 1.
Number 1? Okay. Are there any others? All right, then we will proceed. Our first case is CUP 0904, Kansas Discovery Center Children's Museum. And our staff tonight is Annie for this one.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Case is CU 09-4A. It's a revision to the Kansas Children's Discovery Center, CUP, Division Number 1. They're requesting an amendment to the existing conditional use permit that is currently for a cultural facility on property that's currently zoned R1 Single Family Dwelling District. The property is located at 4400 Southwest 10th Avenue. It comprises a 9-acre portion of Gage Park. The area is bounded by Westchester Road on the west, Conservatory Drive on the north, Rock Garden Drive on the east, and Southwest 10th Avenue on the south. Mostly the area is along Westchester Road and Southwest 10th Avenue. It contains wooded vegetation, trails, and outdoor native play areas. The existing 15,900 square foot Children's Museum is located centrally to the site with its parking. They have proposed a 16,120 addition to contain exhibit halls and classroom space and 74 new parking stalls on the north end of the site. The surrounding area contains residential uses, public uses, semi-public uses, such as the cemetery to the west. The original conditional use permit was approved in 2009 for a cultural facility. Cultural facilities are allowed in the R1 Single Family Dwelling District zoning classification. The Kansas Children's Discovery Center fits the definition of a cultural facility, which is an establishment such as museums, libraries, art galleries, and gardens of historical, cultural, educational interest. The surrounding zoning is R1 single family, includes single family dwellings to the south, cemetery to the west, and park uses and public uses and semi-public uses within Gage Park. The area is designated parks and open space in the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040. That designation is characterized by public and private parks, trails and open spaces, cemeteries, and sometimes golf courses. Staff considers cultural facilities are appropriate land use within this designation as conditional uses. Hence, that's why they're requesting the amendment tonight. This expansion will allow the Discovery Center to continue to promote its goals and objectives of an education, hands-on, learning by doing atmosphere. Staff has evaluated this proposal subject to conditional use permit regulations for site compatibility, operating characteristics, conformance to the comprehensive plan, and section 18.215, and is recommending approval subject to conditions in the staff report. And I am open for any questions that you may have, and the applicants are here to answer your questions and give a presentation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff by the commissioners? Seeing none, is the applicant here tonight?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Kevin Holland, Cook, Flat, and Strobel, representing Children's Discovery Center. And beautiful project. Excited to add this. The only thing I'd add is, in the staff report, we're revising the traffic engineering side. A Discovery Center is interesting to try to figure out what kind of use, and traffic engineers have certain pockets of what would generate traffic based on the square footage. And so when it came through it, they used a use that generated about 180 peak hour vehicles, and I said, oh, that's a lot of vehicles. And so we talked to Children's Discovery Center. I said, well, that'd be about 800 people, which they would love if that was the situation. So we are revising that traffic report. It's more of a museum style. We're going to go with a museum catered with another use that would help out, generate a few other traffic, but in reality, you're talking about 20, 30 additional vehicles during the peak hour. So it'll be a really nice project once it's done, but that's the one thing that's ongoing and will be resolved this week.
Are there any questions for the applicant by commissioners?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin, just help me out here, would you, on the traffic report. I think this is a yes or no. Is there anything that might be coming out of still yet to come from the city engineer, traffic folks, that would be in addition to what you're proposing here tonight?
No, it will be revising it downward. So it would, the trips that were triggered generated a higher level traffic report. We went back in, talked to Public Works Director, and we're figuring out a use because a Children's Discovery Center is more of a museum per se, and a member of the museum. So we're taking those uses down to revise that traffic report. As they have now, they haven't had any traffic issues now. By doubling the space, hopefully it doubles the occupants that are coming for that. But at that point, that we shouldn't have any issue with 10th Street's a major arterial, and then coming into our park roads, it'll accommodate it really well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion by commissioners on this project? Is there any discussion by commissioners on this project?
Yeah, close the public hearing.
Oh, thank you. First, I need to close the public hearing. With that, is there any discussion by commissioners?
Looks like a nice project
Yes. Yes.
and a really important asset to the community.
Yes. I will entertain a motion.
Move approval subject to conditions.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Amanda, please take the roll.
Ms. Hannon. Aye. Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
Mr. Nager.
Aye.
Mr. Kaup.
Aye.
Ms. Herron. Aye. Ms. Nelson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The next case we'll hear tonight is PUD 24-8, the Looking Glass Tattoo. Is requesting amend the zoning map. Bryson, is that you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is for PUD 2408 Looking Glass Tattoo. So this is located at 1220 Southwest Executive Drive. The parcel is 1.27 acres. The applicant is requesting a rezoning from ONI2 Office and Institutional District to PUD Planned Unit Development to allow ONI2 Office and Institutional with limited C2 commercial uses. Those uses are body art service / tattooing, personal services, and a coffee shop or cafe. Staff recommends approval of this subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. I will touch on that a little bit later. We did receive a public comment this morning, which you should have a hand copy that included comments from the public that address some additional conditions that the public would like to see for this project. So I'll touch on that as we move farther into this presentation. Just a view of the property itself. So the picture on the top left of this is looking east from Executive Drive towards the front facade of the property, and then looking north from Huntoon, you can kind of see just coming out of the trees there on the right side of the image where that property is, or where the building is as well. Looking at the zoning map, to the north and to the west, just immediate north, you have ONI2 office and institutional uses with office uses in place. To the northwest, you have some ONI3 as well. To the south, you have a PUD for M2 multifamily uses. Those are developed for multifamily housing. And then there is a C4 vacant commercial site. And then to the east, you have right-of-way for I-470. Looking at the future land use of this site, the Land Use and Growth Management Plan 2040 identifies this as mixed use. This category for new development or redevelopment of mixed use allows for commercial, residential, and/or office that may be located within the same building or within the same area. So this proposed rezoning with the PUD supports mixed use redevelopment as well. So there were some concerns that were brought up during the neighborhood information meeting. I've tried to list those out here so we can kind of touch on them and what's included in the staff report and what those conditions include. So there was some concerns with the pedestrian traffic due to the coffee shop. There's that large multifamily development just south, and whether or not this would drive foot traffic across Huntoon in that location. We'll have some images shortly, but there is definitely a grade change looking to the east and west where the intersection of this is. Electronic messaging centers, that was another concern that was brought up. Roof signage, so roof signage is not allowed in office and institutional. One of our conditions was for roof signage with the C2 uses. We have some conditions on that as well. And then the change to the character of the neighborhood that this introduction of more of commercial uses could have. And then broad range of uses, commercial zoning opens up. So with that in particular, the PUD, we are saying it is the limited commercial uses just for those three that we outline in the staff report. But to address some of those concerns from the neighborhood information meeting, so the pedestrian traffic, the image on the top, you're looking east on Huntoon. So you can kind of see as that grade changes how there's kind of a lack of a view as you kind of move farther east. And then the bottom photo, you're looking west. So again, if you're at the top of that hill, it's very difficult to see people that may be crossing at that intersection. It's currently not striped for pedestrians, and there's no signage for that as well. So additionally, a traffic impact study was waived. This is a high point at this intersection. There's limited sight distance from the top of that hill. Concerns about pedestrian traffic. No pavement markings, and if there's just pavement markings without appropriate signage, it really wouldn't do a whole lot to alert drivers that there could be pedestrians crossing. We did also talk to our city engineering staff. There is also an additional handout. It's a one-pager with the stars on it. That was a comment from city engineers about how they would approach this as well. So that is something that we just received today that we would have to consider as well with that staff report. But at the time, they did determine this did not meet the warrants for a rapid reflective flashing beacon, RRFB, if I accidentally let that term go without defining it first. Another one was roof signs. So concerns with roof signs and whether or not electronic messaging centers would be located on these. One of the conditions is that there would be no electronic messaging center on a roof sign. Electronic messaging centers are allowed in the O&I 2 district on a monument style sign, so that's a separate issue that the base zoning would handle, but that is one issue with the roof signage in particular. Additionally, as part of our conditions, we're limiting the possibility for where wall signs can be located, or excuse me, the building itself, due to the roof line of it, limits wall signs. If you look at kind of the character of the neighborhood and what's around it, a lot of these have a flat facade where there was more room for wall signs. So kind of limiting, so that's why we considered roof signs for this PUD. So we limit the location. We have west and south here. We've actually talked to the applicant, and instead of having southern roof signs, they would prefer the condition actually list the west and the east side. They're limited to 25 square feet per sign, no electronic messaging center, and it must be constructed of a durable, rigid material. So this is how we try to address those concerns from the NIM. Preserving the character of the neighborhood. One of the conditions is no drive-throughs are permitted, so trying to limit the possibility of this becoming fast food or something along those lines. Signage is limited to what's allowed in O&I 2 with those provisions for limited roof signs. There's no alcohol sales that will be permitted in this PUD. And then we're also limiting the size of the cafe to 2,000 square feet as well. So that does not kind of take over the character of the building. Okay. So a few things I want to note before we move to just saying outright approval with the conditions in the staff report. As I stated earlier, we did receive a public comment this morning, and on the back page of that, just so everyone can see, it has 10 conditions outlined. That was 3 additional on top of what the city had recommended. Our understanding from the applicant is that they are accepting of these as well, but just wanted to kind of talk through some of these from city planning's perspective. So one of the things here is the personal services is crossed out from the notes of 1, 2, and 7. Planning's intent when we included the personal services was if we make this so strict that something happens and this use needs to change, we don't want to have to come back and do another PUD to allow for a use that is potentially very similar in nature just for the sake of allowing those personal services. So that is the first one I wanted to address. On item 6, roof signs are currently not allowed to extend above the peak of the roof. So that potentially could be redundant, but keeping that language in there so that it's strong and we make sure that that is clear is fine as well. Item number 9 addresses the pedestrian traffic. And I think we're at this point where we're a little unsure of how much foot traffic will be driven by the cafe to this to this cafe from the neighboring residential uses. City of Topeka engineering staff have kind of indicated that this may warrant a study in the future, and they will do an assessment at that time to kind of see what would be the appropriate treatment. And I think generally we are comfortable with numbers 8 and 10 in this ordinance, so that's really going to dictate the exterior facade and painting, kind of keeping colors neutral so that it fits in with the character of the neighborhood. and then landscaping. The applicant wants to kind of add some landscaping to this in a nature that would be kind of garden or, you know, an attractive space where someone who is potentially getting artwork done on themselves to go and kind of take a relaxing break. So kind of limiting where that is so it's a little bit less visible to the public is part of the goal there. So generally speaking, we are comfortable with the language in this. And again, the applicant is here tonight as well. So I think that if there's any conversation that Planning Commission would like to have regarding these notes as well, we would be open to discussing that. But we're generally comfortable. My understanding is the applicant's comfortable with the recommendations that have been added with the page here. So I'm not 100% sure how to say this. Staff recommends approval of the subject conditions to the staff report and those that have been provided by public comment. And I would take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Bryson. Are there any questions for staff?
So the approval would recommend the crossed out, to keep the crossed out items crossed out. Is that correct?
Correct. And that is something that, again, that was part of why I wanted to lay out why we included them initially in the staff report, was to potentially limit having to come back in the future if personal services are added to the site for a change to that PUD. So that would be, again, if there's additional questions, be happy to take them.
Commissioner Kopp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff is comfortable with 8, 9, and 10. For 8 and 10, any other property in the area subject to these kind of restrictions?
They are not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and number 9, isn't that a matter of policy for the city of Topeka? And whatever policy is in place at that point in time in terms of cost sharing or putting the burden on a particular property?
Correct. And so I will say with number 9, part of why we wanted to have clarification. So there is the one page, the email is from Joe Harrington. He's a City of Topeka traffic engineer. He essentially indicates that it would be something that the city would likely undertake if the city determined that there was enough pedestrian traffic. So I realize that there is a little contradiction between the language on condition number 9 and what is in that email. I think ultimately where we fall is that we will need to determine whether or not there has been enough foot traffic that drives the need, and then a study will need to be done from the city's perspective to see what kind of traffic calming measure or pedestrian crossing is needed.
If 9 is not in there, and 5 years from now, there's a determination by the city that there's a necessity for some kind of a traffic control measure because of pedestrian traffic, the city could create a benefit district to finance that and assess the cost to the properties that are benefited by that walkway, or they could fund it city at large.
Correct. I believe in the email, he specifically says that, sorry, trying to find the exact language here. I do not feel like it will be a large enough amount, therefore I would not make the tattoo parlor and or coffee shop pay for the crosswalk. After the business move in, if pedestrian volumes, traffic volumes, safety issues, or citizens' complaint warrant a crosswalk or RRFB, I will search for available city funds to fund it.
Okay, we'll hear from the applicant, I guess.
Commissioner Nager?
There was a 3-letter acronym that was referring to signs that, was it EMC? Can you give an example of what a sign like that would be?
Yes, so an EMC is an electronic messaging center. So that is kind of the digital portion of a sign you sometimes see where, I don't know the exact science behind it, but basically the imaging changes. So whether you want to change the messaging on a daily, weekly basis or have a picture up there or something along those lines, that's what an EMC is.
So it wouldn't just be restricted to text, it could be the image, and that's what's being restricted.
So in general, and this would be specific to the roof signage,
Okay.
the EMCs.
All right.
Did I answer that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I do have a question. I mean, I'm reading pedestrian volumes, traffic volumes, safety issues, or citizen complaints. That's what is going to trigger the need to have a study for a crosswalk?
That is my understanding, yes. At the initial application phase, this was not a concern that our on-call traffic engineers had. So when it was brought up at the neighborhood information meeting, that is when we kind of started digging into this issue further. Who would be responsible for paying, how that process looks, because there isn't a study prior. We don't really know how much foot traffic this will drive. And so until that business is established, it's tough to measure that and then see if it meets a quantity that would require some sort of pedestrian marking.
So is there some sort of threshold in citizen complaints? Is it 1, 2, 20? How many?
I truthfully do not know an answer to that.
Okay. Also, if you're saying 9, most people are not subject to it, then should that statement, the development shall be the responsibility of the owner of record? Because all conversations indicate that that is not the case, that the city will take care of it. If I'm reading this correctly, should that last part be in there?
I think that last part could be removed. I want to just be clear that we received this. There was communication with the applicant, and the applicant has seen these conditions and had agreed to them. So with that in mind, we were comfortable including it in there. But we did want to follow up with our city engineers to see what their perspective on it would be. With the city engineers' input, I think that part with the responsibility being the owner of record could be removed, and then that it would be a city responsibility. I do believe that is possible, yes.
Thank you.
Was the applicant aware that the city would fund this before they agreed to the terms?
I do not believe so. I would defer to them on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So item 8, I think that might need some clarification versus kind of the image they're showing, and that might apply to only the brick wall and not the glass. Because somebody could decide that reads differently and want to bring it
Absolutely.
back later.
Clarify what specifically is.
Are there any more questions for staff, commissioners? All right, is the applicant here tonight? Please step forward.
Hello, my name is Judith White, and I own Looking Glass Tattoo and Gallery, and we've been in Topeka for 20 years now. We're really hoping that we can buy a building and have this sanctuary space for our clients, for art lovers. We have several folks that get tattooed and they bring friends and family who are not into tattoos, and so we wanted to be able to have a space that was open to everybody that likes art or everybody that wants to have an enjoyable time. So we thought that would be just a great addition, especially since we're often called like grown-up recess time or an adult joy factory, and because we don't do alcohol or anything like that, we thought that was a really great thing to bring to Topeka, kind of an alternative way for grown-ups to kind of go and unwind. We do allow children in our area, but we just have the tattooing area blocked off so that, kids can't go into the tattooing area. But in terms of the cafe and the seating and the outdoor area, we just wanted to make a space that would just be beautiful and make people happy. So as driving by this building on a daily basis, I just thought, oh, this would be perfect. So that's kind of where all of this came from. In addition, my studio's been doing a lot more mural work. We recently did the mural over on 10th and Kansas. We've been working with Downtown Topeka Incorporated to do that. We designed the medallions, one of the medallions that are on Kansas Avenue there. We did that downtown city seal. So we love Topeka. We've been working with Topeka for a long time. As the muraling amps up and we start working more and more with bigger organizations, like right now we're painting the a mural inside of Blaisdell Aquatic Center, the pool in Gage Park. And so this was also part of our expansion, was to have enough room. This place has a basement that we could store a lot of our muraling supplies and kind of expand our business in that direction as well. So that's kind of where we're at. In addition, people get lowered blood sugar when they get tattooed. So having a little cafe with some fresh baked bread we thought was really wonderful. And my business partner has been making bread and butter from her grandparents' recipe since she was little. So she would bring that in and share that with the clients, and they just loved it. And we just thought that would be just a really cool business concept and something new and modern for Topeka to make us a little cool. I think that we've come a long way, and I'm really excited to be part of that. So that's kind of where we are on what we want to do. We have spoken with our neighbors and all of those concerns that you addressed. I've got a revised version of kind of a mock-up of the front of the building that addresses the sign issue. When I made the one that we showed, that was just sort of me kind of letting my imagination go wild. When I actually realized, okay, we've got pretty strict sign codes here, I dug into that and figured out what that was. And so my new proposal has a single roof sign on it, and it's got just 2 window signs. So we basically lowered everything. And I have shown that to the folks that were protesting. Is that the new one that you have? Yes. So that's the new one that we've got, and they seemed to be happy with this. And then, the other thing was just we would have one other roof sign, either on the south or on the east side of that building, depending on visibility. But I believe that they have approved all of that, and we're more than happy to work with them. Part of the reason we want to move to that area is because it is beautiful and it is a little bit higher end, and that's sort of the clientele that we serve and that we want to continue to serve. So yeah, we want a really safe place for folks to go. There's lots of different types of tattoo studios, and we want people to know that this is a safe studio, an elevated studio, a place where you're going to get artwork that people really care about. In addition to the legitimacy of us being artists that have been lucky enough to have the opportunity to make public art for Topeka. We really want to continue to do that and bring some legitimacy to that aspect of our business as well. So, and we did agree to that pricing or to the charge if that was necessary, mostly because we just want to be good neighbors and we care about our clients. We care about our neighbors. So at the time we weren't aware of how that might work, but if it was a difference between getting this space and not getting this space, we're happy to do that. So however that works and is fair, of course, we're kind of coming into this a little bit new to this scene. So we're just coming in very humble and willing to make sure that our neighbors are happy with us and what we do, and that they know that we care about them and that we want to preserve the character of that area.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant by the commissioners?
I have a question. Your outdoor space, where are you planning on putting that?
The outdoors, so that's part of what drew us to this space, is that it's sitting on 1.27 acres. The building itself is about 6,000 square feet. So the outdoor space is basically a backyard. It can't really be seen from the street, and we had agreed one of their stipulations was that if we had any sculptures or artwork, that it be displayed in that backyard east of the building there. So, and we're perfectly happy to do that because that's the main area that we have to do that with. So that's not a problem for us at all. We love the idea of being a little bit of a secret garden in this kind of hidden wonderland that you walk in and see this nice building, and then you walk in and it's just, surprising and beautiful and whimsical and interesting, so.
You mentioned with the signs that you were thinking between, was it southeast and west were different potential directions. Right now we have it that the suggested language would be just to have those signs on the east and west. Mm-hmm. Would you prefer that we do east, west, and
Well,
south?
initially, the suggestion was west and south, and we had thrown in the east just because it might be a little bit more visible from Sam's Club, Wanamaker area. But honestly, we're open to whatever the restrictions are. You know, it's a little sliver of visibility right there, and we have a strong clientele. I know that they're going to find us wherever we go. So in fact, it might be kind of fun to track us down. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's something that matters, if we have to, you know, set in stone whether we want that. We were thinking, you know, a roof sign per side, you know, two maximum 2 roof signs, maximum 2 sides is what we were looking at. So, but we can commit to south or to the east at this point.
I'm not sure it would have a significant impact on the application. I just want to make sure that whatever it was that we were going to have in the language here tonight was what we meant it to be.
Yeah, honestly, we just haven't really dug into exactly our roof signs on the sides yet. So that's just one of those things that, you know, we know we want one. Like I said, if we need to lock one down, we will happily do that. We just haven't quite dug into what the aesthetics would be and how that would work on the building exactly. But we are happy to limit that to just a single sign.
All right.
You come across as very, very sincerely accommodating, and that's good. I mean, you want to be a good neighbor. You said that several times. I certainly believe you. In terms of the original set of conditions that the staff proposed, 1 through 7, do you have any issue relating to any of those? Any concerns about being able to comply?
No, I know that we can, you know, we gave them our idea based on just, you know, what we had thought, but we are happy to do some creative problem solving and do some workarounds. So, yeah, I don't seem to have a problem with any of what they've proposed.
Yeah, I was asking about items 1 through 7, conditions 1 through 7, but the other ones that have been put in front of us tonight, and take the crosswalk out of it for a moment, just about the solid color and statuary and so things of that nature. As a good neighbor, it sounds like you would be responsive to concerns of your neighbors, whether this was whether the city was mandating or not. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, I would.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any testimony from the public?
Good evening, Commissioners. Angela Sharp with Bartlett and West, and our home offices since 1997 have been at 1200 Southwest Executive Drive, so obviously a next-door neighbor to this property. And we also own the vacant property that is directly across the street from the property. And we met with Judith and her team last week, and we're really excited to hear about their commitment to Topeka and about their commitment to a quality project. And one of the things we talked about with them is the fact that we understand their intent and think we understand their dream for the property, but as we all know, for zoning, that carries through with the property. So the concerns that we had and that we shared in those revisions to the conditions really had more to do with what could occur on the property in the future if, for whatever reason, they were no longer in the building. And so to kind of highlight some of the reasons that we asked for a few of those, and I know Bryson explained that from the planning department's perspective, you know, they're trying to look out for what can happen with zoning and trying not to bring, you know, superfluous cases before you all. The reason that we had crossed off the other personal services was just, you know, from Judith's description of her vision, we don't take issue with that at all. But, you know, anytime you introduce commercial to an area, it's a little bit easier to add on to those commercial uses. And so for us as a neighbor, we were hopeful that those additional commercial uses could be taken out of the PUD so that should someone else want to do something different, they would have to come back to you. That would be our hope, that they would have to come back, just so that we can understand as a neighbor, you know, what's occurring on our cul-de-sac. As far as the language that was suggested for the pedestrian beacon, in my experience, if a developer comes forward with a project, any of the costs associated with improvements for traffic or anything else is going to be borne by the developer and not by the city as a whole. And so that's why we had suggested having that language, and that's why there is the language in there that says specifically that foot traffic generated by this development, so that it's clear that if that development is who is generating the traffic, that they would then pay for any improvements if the city deemed, and perhaps we should, it could be amended to say if the city deemed it wasn't going to be borne by the city as a whole. That was our intent, that we didn't want to have to pay for, through a benefit district, through improvements that we didn't generate. And I know that's analyzed with traffic studies, but just for clarity's sake, we suggested having that condition added. And to answer your question, as far as the facade and the facade treatment, our intent was complete. We saw the mock-up that Judith had done, and the stained glass windows are gorgeous, and we don't take issue with that at all. It's just, you know, the actual facade of the building, the brick of the building is what we were more looking at. So hope that gives you all some clarification, and we think they will be great neighbors. And again, I think what they're trying to do is fantastic. I think it's great that they're trying to make this capital investment in our community and make use of a building that's been vacant for a long time. We're just trying to protect, as employee owners, our home offices, if, you know, they shouldn't be in the building any longer, so that the zoning that's in place is something that we're comfortable with as well. So I stand for any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Cobb?
I appreciate your comments about welcoming the potential new neighbor. Thank you for that. Your concern about the changing character of the neighborhood. Would you agree? I mean, Topeka, like many cities around the country, is overbuilt with office space. And its staff makes a good observation that the demand is weak right now and may be for many years to come. You guys didn't say that, but for some time to come. I'm hoping we're going to see a lot more applications like this one, where you're going in and looking at vacant office space, and it'd be institutional use, residential use. So we're going to see this kind, I'm hoping we're going to see this kind of application more frequently in the future. And so my concern is over-regulating and discouraging that kind of change in use of the properties. So I guess I'm not asking you a question. I'm just, I guess, challenging the need for the additional conditions that you're proposing.
And I completely agree. And I present to this commission mixed-use developments, and I agree with that, that is a need. But at the same time, I think we have to go on a case-by-case basis, and we have to look at the existing development and what fits in each development. And we've made numerous investments over the years to our home offices, and we're very proud of them. And so we want to do what's best for the community as a whole and for our fellow employee owners in the value of our building. So we're just looking out for what we feel is our vested interest in the cul-de-sac.
But the city of Topeka doesn't require you to maintain your building in one solid color, right?
No, they do not, but
and this condition that you proposed would be the city of Topeka would be mandating, requiring that be a solid color on a nearby property.
There are numerous cases on PUDs where there are requirements that developments have a similar facade and similar colorations to the building. So this isn't unusual for a PUD development. We do that regularly on PUDs.
But your property is not subject to the kind of restrictions you're talking about here.
No, but our property adheres to that. That is the appearance of our cul-de-sac, and that's what we're asking for, is that the appearance of the cul-de-sac and the character of the cul-de-sac is upheld. So that's what we're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience? Yep.
Good evening, Commissioners. Lance Royer, Stone and Story Real Estate Group. I represent the sellers who were excited to see that staff was recommending the approval of this. You're absolutely right, Commissioner. There's way too many office buildings open, empty, and unable to be sold or rented, for that matter, in Topeka. These sellers have tried to sell this building for several years. They've tried to rent it. There's just way too many office spaces. And we're excited when the Looking Glass came with a different idea for that area. So just want to say thank you from the sellers for considering this. Thank you from staff for recommending it.
Are there any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing now. Is there any discussion by commissioners on this case? Commissioner Kopp?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When the time comes for a motion, I'm either make the motion or support a motion to approve, subject to the conditions the staff put together, conditions 1 through 7. I think the staff deserves credit. I mean, they looked at this, they worked with the applicant, they heard the concerns of neighbors, and these are the conditions they came up with. I think 8 and 10 are over-regulation, you know, at a time when, staff, we're working with staff to try to eliminate unnecessary regulation on development. They seem pretty modest, and I understand the applicant says that she's acceptable of them, so what's the rub? I guess, well, I don't think it's appropriate for the city of Topeka to put restrictions like this upon a project like this. If the neighbors work things out, you know, amongst themselves, that's great, but it's not the business of the city. And with respect to the condition number 9 about the crosswalk, we've already said my spiel about that. That's the city of Topeka's development policy at that point in time. And it has no business being in here. All respect, I know the staff said they're okay with it, but I'm okay with the staff's original set of conditions. I'm not okay with what has been presented here tonight with 8, 9, and 10. So anyway.
Do any of the commissioners have any thoughts on Commissioner Kopp's statements? Commissioner Herring?
I just want to say I actually agree 100%. I feel like what the city proposed originally is sufficient. And if, you know, neighbors want to work things out between neighbors, that should be on a case-by-case based agreement between them. I don't think it's right to put it on this applicant, especially if not everybody in that same area is going to be held to the same standard.
Thank you. Commissioner Nelson?
I agree as well. I think if you're going to, what's right for one is right for all. If you're going to do it for one, you've got to rewrite everybody. And I don't think it's fair to the Looking Glass to have to be held to higher standards than everybody else around them. I mean, that means, you know, everybody's going to have to plant the same flowers one day, or, I mean, you're talking about HOA then for businesses, and no, that's just, no, you can't do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. Commissioner Herring?
And I'm sorry, I just had another thought I want to add to, just thinking about setting a precedent for projects that may come in the future is why I feel so strongly about this. That I am hoping to see more creative development come to this area. I think it's very much needed for economic viability of the city. And I'm just really concerned when we're going to allow over-regulation. So a lot of my suggestions is also thinking of future development.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I'm very reluctant to do this after you've closed the public hearing and you're about to make a motion, but just wanted to make an observation. So staff's recommended conditions about the roof sign location was on that they'd be limited to the west and south side of the building. I believe staff is indifferent as to whether it's the west or the east side of the building. We didn't fully know the preferences of the applicant at the time we wrote that.
So that could be a more general statement?
So it could be a more general statement. Maybe it's not allowed on the north side of the building, or it's just allowed on the west and east, because I believe that's the preference of the applicant. We were not aware of that when we put these recommendations in writing.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder, Madam Chair, if we could just say allowed on 2 sides, accept the north, and then they can choose which one they can decide which one they want, which two sides they want.
I believe that would meet everyone's objectives.
Okay.
Did you get that, Amanda? Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out on 1 and 2, I don't have a problem, I don't think, with the personal services being removed it doesn't affect this client, but I understand the protecting the future. If they happen to not be there, that it just doesn't open it wide up to anything, so. And I also agree with Commissioner Kopp.
So are you suggesting that it not be striked?
No, I'm suggesting that it would be as it's struck
Okay,
on here.
okay, thank you.
And I just want to clarify, that's also on condition number 7 as well, that it would be struck.
Oh, okay. All right.
Madam Chair, I apologize, I wasn't following whether or not you want to keep that struck language in or have it deleted.
I think I like it being struck, so it doesn't affect this owner, but it protects the current owners for wide open development later. So it has to come back to us to get something else put there. I don't have a problem with that.
I actually don't have a problem with that either. Does anyone else? All right.
Well, could I ask what, before I buy into that, what else besides, you've got the examples of hair and nail salon, what else falls under the heading of personal service that we would be prohibiting them from engaging in?
It wouldn't be prohibiting, it would just be letting us know when when the use changed, if it changed in that way. Is that correct? That's the way I
I think
understand
it would
it.
prohibit it unless you got it
Approved.
come back to the planning commission.
Right. So it's not prohibiting anything, it's just saying they're going to have to come back.
You'd have to come back either for a minor or major amendment
Correct.
to the PUD. To do what?
Okay.
So I'm going to try to answer Commissioner Kopp's question about what other personal services are there. What comes to mind is a barbershop, hair salon, nail salon. I don't know if massage therapy would be considered personal services. It's probably a question. That could almost be medical. As far as what the regulations say about amendments is if you are changing the nature of the land use, that it requires a major amendment, it has to go back to the planning commission. Sometimes if it's just very subtle difference, the planning director uses the discretion to not take it back to the commission if it's a subtle difference. But if there's some thought that it's a difference, especially if it's something that's in an approved condition, then I would see that as potentially a major amendment. So what that means is if you crossed out personal services as being allowed, potentially, I think what that means is, especially given the conversation here tonight in the minutes of this meeting, that would mean that it would have to come back as a major amendment for something that's really pretty minor. That's the. Oh, okay, so, interesting. So, personal services, thank you. It's in the land use matrix in the zoning code. That includes beauty and barbershops, laundromats, which I wouldn't have considered personal services. Self-service laundromats, dry cleaning, tailors, tanning salons.
Interesting mix of
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah.
So, commissioners, any thoughts on the actual term of, now that we know what they actually are? Do we still want the language to be struck, or should it stay within the conditions?
Now that you have the
Yeah.
bigger picture, do you still want to keep it struck?
I think the one that sticks out to me the most is a self-service laundromat in that location. The other ones probably would be okay with. But
So what is your suggestion?
Well, I think I agree with Commissioner Dean. They all have a similar impact. I think you have to think about the impact. And a self-service laundromat tend to be open at different hours. Now, they have some limitations on that in their statement of operations. So that's the way personally I feel. I don't know if you agree with that, but I think that, hair salons, nails, all those things are very similar in just their characteristics. Some of those might carry a little more traffic, maybe more frequent traffic.
I would tend to agree. The self-service laundry is probably the one that stands out the most. But again, I don't know how you begin to list all these other uses by just excluding one within that, I think is where and then if there's, these things that fall into kind of the gray area of whether or not it's allowed, that determination as well makes it a little difficult, and I would understand why that would be struck as well.
And again, I support it, but I just wanted to make sure I'm on the right page and that they would come back to this commission in order to have something that fell within the realm of personal services, irregardless.
If personal services is struck from condition number 2,
And
that would
one
be the
and
end.
7.
1 and 2, and that'd be the case.
And 7. I think it's 7. Yes, 7.
Yeah. It'd probably require a change to the statement of operations, but, yeah.
So they would come back to us.
Correct, because we do tie this to the statement of operations, and we do have a general breakdown of the statement of operations as well, in case this came up for the presentation. So this not only breaks down the square footage of how the space will be utilized, but general hours that it will be open, and then how many patrons you would expect. So I think if you were going to drive a use that is going to drastically change something within the statement of operations, it would require a major amendment to come back.
I don't have a problem with that.
I will not get knocked down, drag out, but I think it is overregulation, but I defer to, some legitimate points have been made, so.
Okay.
And obviously, the applicant is okay with it, but.
All right. Is there any other discussion by the commissioners?
Before we were, I meant to say this before we got in the weeds, but I was going to say more broadly that I am just happy to see that someone is finding a creative use for something that that's not being leased out, and hopeful that more buildings are able to be used for creative things.
Agreed. All right. I will entertain a motion by the commissioners. Who wants to take a stab at that?
I'll try.
All right.
Oh.
No. Gentlemen, fight it.
I'd make a motion to approve, including 1 through 7 of the recommendations on the, I guess the new report, or amendment, I don't know how to word it.
1 through 7 were in the initial staff report.
Yeah, I was going to say 1 through 7.
1 through 7.
There.
1 through 7.
But you want the changes to condition 1 and 2 that,
And 7.
No, it's just the condition 7, because 1 and 2 are already crossed out.
7 was supposed to be included in that. I apologize there. So the initial cross out was supposed to be 1, 2, and 7.
1 through 7, including the crossing out of personal services on 1, 2, and 7.
Correct.
And the signage.
Yeah, and the
And-
allowing signage on
Two sides.
two sides, not the north side.
Not the north, correct.
Correct. I so move.
Yes.
I got look, did I get a second? I heard a second. All right. All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes,
I just want to make
Commissioner Hack.
absolutely sure, thank you. So it's the staff's recommendation, it's subject to items 1 through 7, conditions 1 through 7 in the staff report, with the difference being on 1, striking the language on personal service and the parenthetical, on 2, striking personal service and parenthetical, on 6, adding the no portion of any roof sign language, the last bullet, and then 7, we would be deleting, again, personal service and the parenthetical, as, in the same way as on 1 and 2.
On number 6, it's the west, the first one, west and south sides.
Number 6, the last bullet was not an original staff recommendation. It was part of the discussion that was
Correct.
subsequently.
And within the sign code, it currently is not allowed to go above that roof line. So it was something that was added just to be clear for the applicant and Angela, that we would be able to ensure that there was no sign that would extend beyond the roof line. So that is already within the code that can be regulated without that.
This is staff language on that bullet?
No.
If,
The no
are you
portion
looking at
of
the
any
staff
roof
report
sign?
or the one with 10 items? Are
sorry?
you looking at this?
One of 10 items.
On the one that's 10 items, that last bullet point was added, so that is not staff language related to the roof signs above the
Ridge line,
ridge line. That was not staff language.
the sign code.
But you're saying the sign code.
It's already
limits it
regulated.
already.
It's already regulated within the sign code,
Yeah, the
correct?
sign code doesn't allow that.
I guess.
Okay. So, is there a motion? Goodness,
Any second?
yeah.
So, now, so what we're seconding is all the changes except for that bullet point, correct?
1 through 7 on this sheet, except we're striking personal services on 7.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And then on number 6, the first bullet point, it says limiting only west and south. It'd be west, east, or south, and on 2 sides.
All right. Then, Amanda, can you please take the roll?
Ms. Hannon,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Mr. Kaup,
Aye.
Ms. Herron. Aye. Ms. Nelson,
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Go make some, go make some good bread. All right. All right, the next agenda item is AC. One moment. The next agenda item is ACZR 2401, a request to amend the Topeka Municipal Code, Title 18. Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So there are some slides on here you've seen before. We've had discussion on this item, been a lot of discussion on this item, actually. But tonight is the night of the public hearing, so it's the night that we're asking you to make a recommendation on closing the public hearing. So just kind of some review here, finding missing middle. Missing middle includes accessory dwelling units as a type of missing middle housing, but it also includes duplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, some small multifamily residential projects. Generally speaking, it's considered compatible with single-family neighborhoods in form and scale. Missing means these types are not often found on our market. They are in some places, but not maybe as much as they should be based on the housing study that the city conducted and adopted. Middle means they're in between single-family detached housing and mid and high-rise housing. So why address missing middle? It's really about marketability and affordability. Single-family zone neighborhoods are mismatched to provide life cycle aging in place choices across spectrum of affordability and demographics. That's a very long bullet. That really just means that there's probably not enough choice in the marketplace, different types of housing types. And ADUs are an important part of that. And today, if someone wants to do an ADU, even if it's for a relative, we don't permit that. We just have to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't permit that if it's in single-family residential districts. Other benefits of missing middle, it adds supply of naturally occurring affordable housing, NOAA by design. And it really means smaller units, lower land building costs per unit, less parking. Something that's often missed is that if someone wants to buy a single-family home, they're investing in a single-family home, having a second unit may make that feasible where it would be a stretch for them otherwise. So it allows someone to make an investment in an existing home, which is a positive thing, especially for neighborhoods. Increases pool of local developers and properties, and it's growth at a neighborhood scale, what you might think of as hidden density. So it might densify the neighborhood a little bit, but it's not obvious, not conspicuous. It's incremental. So what is an accessory dwelling unit? So these have other terms: carriage houses, garlos, mother-in-law units, granny flats. It's a smaller independent residential dwelling located on the same lot as a standalone single-family home. It can be attached or detached from the principal home. It can be converted portions of an existing home. So there are some, picture says 1,000 words. There are 6 different types shown on the right. Those are different types of ADUs. Has the potential to increase housing affordability, and it provides a wider array of housing options. I guess I've said that a few times. But here's some just visual examples of ADUs. The one on the left is not in Topeka. Looks like it's in a place with different types of trees. But the one on the right, bottom right, I believe is in Topeka. Okay, so the process that we've gone through so far, staff conducted a survey in 2022. We got some feedback from that. Part of that feedback was, yes, this is something we really need. There was a little skepticism, honestly, with some of the comments, but we did do that survey. I think part of it, what I recall, is that as people did the survey, as they got to the end of it, you could tell they started understanding more what an ADU was, because their responses seemed to be different a little bit. We organized a work group. Some of the commissioners were part of that work group, met a couple times. Some of the input we received from the work group changed the draft standards. So that was helpful. We conducted a few neighborhood meetings, met with the Citizen Advisory Council, College Hill and Tennessee Town neighborhoods. These were well attended. We got a lot of good questions. We met with the Topeka Home Builders meeting, or at that meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Nelson, who helped us organize that. Very well attended meeting. Got some good questions at that meeting. And then this was on your agenda for discussion at the last meeting in May. Okay, so the definition in the draft, it's not that much different than the existing definition. It just clarifies a few things. A single dwelling unit that is incidental to, subordinate to, and located on the same zoning lot as the principal building. That accessory dwelling may either be integrated into or added onto the principal dwelling or established as a detached accessory dwelling building, shall be referred to in these regulations as an ADU. So I think what's key here is that the ADU is incidental to and subordinate to. If it wasn't, if it was just 2 units attached, it would be what's called a duplex. So that's an important part of this. So this is the land use matrix in the zoning code. This shows you how that change would appear in the matrix. It would be an S and a C. What that means is S means it's permitted by right as long as it meets certain standards. And The standards are, draft standards are in the report, in the packet. If it doesn't meet all those standards, there's an opportunity for someone to apply for a conditional use permit. That's what the C means in this table. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the standards. I'm not going to cover every one of them. They're in your packet. You can certainly ask questions about those. Generally, a single ADU is permitted as an accessory use to the principal dwelling and allowed subject to satisfying these standards. Accessory dwelling units are classified into the following types. So some of these are interior, they're attached. There's an interior that's above a garage. There's an interior that's an upper floor. There's an interior that's a basement. And then there are a couple of detached examples. One, just an ADU detached, one an ADU on top of a detached garage. So, summary of the standards, size limitations. Detached accessory dwelling shall contain no more than 800 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less. Integrated accessory dwelling shall contain no more than 800 square feet and shall not exceed 80% of the area of the principal dwelling. So the reason of the size limitations is to address the accessory nature, the subordinate nature of the unit relative to the size of the home. An owner occupancy requirement. So this is also related to it being an accessory use. Either the accessory dwelling unit or the principal dwelling unit shall be occupied by an owner of record of the property. So this means that you can't have both units renter occupied. They have to be owner occupied. Okay, so design. This KK6 addresses building design guidelines to help ensure compatibility with the principal dwelling. The guidelines include exterior finish material, architectural details such as roof pitch and trim, and also windows. So part of this is, if this happens, how is it going to be least disruptive to the existing character of the neighborhood? If it doesn't look markedly different from the principal dwelling. Off-street parking requirement. One off-street parking space on a hard surface meeting City of Topeka standards shall be provided in addition to the off-street parking required for the principal dwelling. So consider that for most single-family dwellings, the parking requirement is 2. For very small ones, it's 1, but for most, it's going to be 2. We being the planning division, planning development department, consider that a driveway that's in front of the house, that qualifies as parking. So 2 sounds like a lot, but in reality, it's probably not very much. And then this would be 1 additional parking space for the accessory dwelling. Neighborhood notification. So we received some feedback when we had a neighborhood information meeting that neighborhoods should be notified when we receive applications for this. There wasn't a lot of detail given to that comment other than that, just that neighborhoods should be notified. So the question then is asked, well, what does that mean? You're notified. What does that mean? You can appeal it? Does that mean that we're going to put it on hold if you recommend denial? So it doesn't really answer those questions. It just wanted notification. So we've provided a separate document with some options in the packet. And those options are, thank you. Okay, so there are really 3 options, I guess, if you want to look at it this way. One is well, there's more than 3, if you just think this is a bad idea. Or it needs more work. But if you want to make a recommendation to the governing body to approve a text amendment, the first option is just adopt it without a notification requirement. So the draft as written or something similar. The second option is require a notification or include a notification requirement, but the notification would occur after it is approved. So it's just information. We're providing the neighborhood, maybe it's the adjacent property owner, maybe it's the adjacent property owner plus the registered neighborhood association or the NIA. The third option is to provide notice, but put approval of it on hold for 10 days. This still doesn't say really what that means in terms of, there's some questions about what that means exactly, but number three, option three is pretty significant because you're saying, no, we're not going to approve it until we've notified the neighbors and we've actually waited for some feedback. So what was I going to say? Something that's very important about the ADUs, as recommended, is that it's a use by right, has to meet standards. There's not a separate application process. It's something that people apply for as part of a building permit. I will say that it'd be very unusual for us to send notice based on a building permit when we issue a building permit or when we're about to issue a building permit. That would be something that's pretty new for the city to do. There are some kind of arcane examples, mainly with historic preservation. There's a demolition delay where we do a notice, but generally that'd be very unusual. I can't think of any other instance where we do that. Short-term rentals. With short-term rentals, a few years ago, staff brought a text amendment to the Planning Commission, and there was quite a lot of stakeholder engagement. We had multiple meetings, and one of the things that came out of those meetings was we want to notify neighbors, or the neighbors really want to be notified of these. So where we landed on that is, first of all, the short-term rental in a single-family district, it requires a application form. Someone to complete an application, they pay a fee, and then we process it, and then we grant approval, and we send a letter, and the approval lasts for 2 years. And what we do then is we notify adjacent property owners. And when we first started doing that, I will say we got some phone calls. There were some people that didn't like the idea. There's still some people that don't necessarily like short-term rentals, but we really haven't, to my knowledge, we really haven't been getting phone calls or questions when people get these notices. I think the purpose of that notice for the short-term rentals is really just to, hey, be aware of this, we're doing this. It's kind of a courtesy, I guess. But it also kind of maybe makes people a little bit more aware of what's going on. Maybe they can, if they see something that doesn't look right, they can complain. But that's the way that notice system or that notification system works for short-term rentals. One thing I wanted to make sure we responded to, Commissioner Nager sent us a couple questions today. And I'm trying not to read this word for word, but one of the first questions was, aren't many of the reasons planning notifies neighbors related to a legal change in land use, setting a hearing or holding a public meeting? In other words, beginning of some legal process for a potential change. Would that distinguish them from ADUs as a use by right with no land use change? So the answer is yes. Just to be a little more specific, so for proposed zoning changes and conditional use permit applications, Kansas statutes and the city's regulations, city's ordinance requires a publication of a notice in the newspaper and a written notice be sent to all owners of property within 200 feet of the site. We also require a neighborhood information meeting, but that's not required by law. That's something that's a little bit extra. So, those notice requirements do not apply to uses by right, the same kind of notice. And that notice is sent prior to the hearing. Okay, so the second question, would it be possible to give NIAs, NAs, or the CAC general information on ADU permitting uptake, particularly as this is new policy? This is a new policy that's being implemented. And could that balance the need for general information in our neighborhood organizations with a specific permittee's full and private use of their land? So there are probably different ways of doing that. I think one way is what we plan to do anyway is just monitor how this is going. Are we getting permit applications for ADUs? My speculation is we're not going to get that many. We'll get a few maybe, but I don't think we're going to get a lot. But we would monitor those regardless. So I think that this whole thing about, what does they say here? So you could include a notification requirement. I think the concern there is that it's not very clear about what that means for the decision-making process. Someone could get a notice and they think, oh, that means I can protest this. And they really can't. Now, theoretically, if someone receives a notice, they could contact us and they could say, well, I don't really think that that's what that is allowed. I don't think it meets these standards, whatever. They could file an appeal, and that appeal would be heard by the Board of Zoning Appeals. I almost hate to say that because I think you could get a lot of frivolous appeals. But, and I use the word theoretical because I don't know how that would play out in reality. An appeal is not decided based on whether someone thinks it's a good idea or not. It's decided on whether the city made an error in a decision they made, like an error of interpretation or something else. So staff has some concerns about a notification requirement. Can you incorporate it into the text amendment? Yes, you could. I think that it could give someone a false sense of confidence or a false idea that they can stop something they don't like. And I think it could lead to some inconsistency in how these are approved, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil. We get notified and complaints. Is that going to cause us to interpret the regulations a little differently? So our recommendation is as proposed. Definitely, there's room for discussion, I suppose, on this, but our recommendation is that there not be a notification requirement. Again, I think you can do that. Is it just here, we just approved this and we're just letting you know, or is it something else? So, with that, be happy to answer any questions, or I'll try to answer questions.
Commissioner Nelson, or shall we just go down the line?
I do not agree with the notifications. I do not think that those should be sent out. What's next? When somebody wants to put up a shed, we're going to notify them about that. Somebody puts up a fence, we're going to notify them about that. I mean, it just keeps going more and more and more. You can, as long as it fits within code, as long as it fits within city regulations, you should be able to do it. My neighbor shouldn't be able to tell me if I can put something on my property like that. I don't think it's up to you guys to notify the neighborhood on something along those lines. I agree with you. I do not think we should have to send notifications.
Thank you. Commissioner Harris? No? Commissioner Cobb?
No, go ahead.
I agree. I don't like the notification portion, especially if there's not a chance for any comments. It's just to be notified, and there's nothing that can be done about it, then I don't see the point of that. If you can be notified and then you have a 10-day thing, then I can see the point of that, but I don't think I like that because that's in the code. So I did have a question on the number 5, the owner occupancy requirement. I'm just kind of curious, what happens if you have an owner that's occupying a main dwelling, you have a set ADU, and that owner, let's say, passes away? Does the ADU get evicted? Or how does that, if it's not an owner, if you no longer have the owner occupying the main structure?
That's a good question. I think owner occupancy, I don't want to show my bias too much here, but I think that the owner occupancy, that helps make it more of an accessory use, which is what it's intended to be. But the ongoing enforcement could be difficult. Now, you could require that it be recorded at the register of deeds on the property, so it, comes up in a title search, and, ADU is only allowed if there's an owner occupant on the property. That doesn't address the problem you raised, that someone passes away, what happens then? And they would have to find a buyer that's willing to stay in that house, and they, maybe they can, but yeah.
Okay.
As you might mention, that's one of the reasons why many cities have avoided going to the owner occupancy requirement, just because of the myriad of situations that come up. People die, people move away. It creates enforcement issues, and then you have to kind of scramble around and figure out what you're going to do if you're going to require somebody to get a CUP in order to continue to use the facility or use the units that way. But it's a problem.
Yeah, I guess I was along those same lines. I mean, what does that actually do to the status of their property if the owner is no longer in the main unit? What does the property on the matrix then become?
So it's still an ADU, it just doesn't comply. It can't be a legal ADU, to answer your question.
Okay, so it's just
And
illegal.
when Commissioner Kopp said, do they apply for conditional use permit, I had to remember, is that a way, can that be a remedy for that? And yeah, as this is written, that is a remedy for that. They could apply for a conditional use permit.
I know we're going to have a public hearing on this, so we'll have more commission discussion after the public hearing, but my general observation is, as before, is that we have such rigorous standards for the of right ADU, that I think what's going to happen is we're going to push folks towards the CUP process, which will have the public notice and public hearing, and that remedies the issue that's been raised by the neighborhood association. But it is a very rigorous set of standards that we're proposing here in order to qualify for the of right ADU. So, and I know that we've had that discussion and the battle was lost, so that's fine. I think the approach of having of right and CUP is a very sound one. It's just I would have preferred to see fewer requirements, fewer standards, or a little more liberal approach in allowing the ADUs to go in. But I like the proposal as submitted.
I'll hold until after the public hearing.
I just have one quick question. Does there need to be any clarification about trying to use these as a short-term rental?
So, as written, this would not prevent them from being used as a short-term rental.
Would they have to get another permit for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would require an administrative permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's no more questions for staff, then I open the public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that has any statements? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and have discussion amongst commissioners.
Richard, thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, under the heading of, it's number 8 on the draft language, paragraph 8. The heading is existing legal non-conforming uses. And again, not to get into the weeds too much, but the text just talks about legal non-conforming setbacks at that point, not uses. So I think that caption needs to be changed.
To buildings, probably. to buildings, like existing legal non-conforming buildings?
Yeah,
Yep. Yep, understood.
Commissioner Nager?
I was just going to say that I'm very pleased that we're doing this. We know that Topeka needs more housing, and if this can help, particularly people who, whether they're aging in place, younger people, maybe students at Washburn, there's just a lot of people who have varied wants in their housing that doesn't fit a cookie cutter approach, and I'm very happy that we're doing that. Yeah.
And I just want to second, I'm happy to see this getting passed as well. I would prefer for there to not be the owner occupant requirement, just because when you think about the people that are actually going to be creating the housing, I feel like just from what I've seen in my experience, an investor is probably going to be the one to actually create more housing option and be the person who probably do this at scale compared to like a onesie twosie. But, you know, the option with the CUP is there, and we can kind of just see how the application process goes and if there needs to be any changes from there. But overall, I'm pleased.
actually, one of the things, I've mentioned this before, and I suggested it be part of the text, but I lost that battle too. But I think when this goes to the governing body, it's important for them to see to understand what the thinking and all the merits that we could identify with this. And I think a very important one, Mike, that we have talked about before, is that the ADUs create a revenue stream. They put money in the pocket of the person who has the principal dwelling, and they may need that money, or that money may enable them to keep and maintain that principal structure, stay in the house, and that's an important feature, I think, of the ADUs. It could have been part of the purpose language in the draft language, but just as long as it's in the minutes, that if that's the sense of the commission, that is an advantage or benefit of the ADU, then I would like the governing body to take that into account when they look at this.
Thank you. I would just like to add to everyone else's comments. I was in those first meetings when the housing study came out, and it was excited by what was in the housing study, and then quickly disappointed that there didn't seem to be any city organization willing to take the charge for the housing study. So I'm so happy that I was here when it happened, and that it's not perfect. It is not perfect, but it is a step in a good direction. As a landlord in Topeka, I've been appalled at some of the housing conditions that I've seen, and I'm hoping the ADU amendment will at least open up the market for people who might be a little bit more sympathetic, empathetic to the needs of our community. So it might, again, it's not perfect, but I think it is a good step in a great direction. So thank you to staff for helping, and everyone else who was either on the committee or has made some comment along the way. So with that, I will entertain a motion. We have options, y'all.
Madam Chair, I would offer a motion to approve and send on to the governing body the ADU regulations as submitted by staff.
All right.
I'll second.
Do we need to add in there if we want the notifications sent out? Does that need to be part of the motion? How would the notification process?
If you want there to be a notification, you would include that in your motion to add that. Yeah, so just to be clear, Commissioner Kauf's motion is to approve as recommended, including the owner.
The motion does not contain any provision for notification.
Yeah.
That was a second.
Correct.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Amanda, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Dean,
Aye.
Ms. Nelson,
Aye.
Ms. Herron,
Aye.
Mr. Kaut,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Ms. Hannon.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Our next agenda item is A2402. JJH Properties LLC is requesting annexation of 38.7 acres. Lisa, Bryson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so as you stated, this is annexation for 38.7 acres. This is a unilateral annexation, so the property owner has consented to annexation. It is contiguous with the city boundary currently. This will also require going to the governing body, so we're here with the commissioners tonight to look for a recommendation that this aligns with the land use and growth management plan. The property is roughly 380 feet west of the intersection of Northwest Button Road and Northwest 25th Street, and it's located on the north side. This property is in the urban growth area within the employment tier and has a future land use of industrial. Water is available currently along 25th Street, and sewer is currently available to the site, and it is roughly 680 feet to the south. So it kind of runs in that blue area just south of the property, but it is available there. And the developer proposes to build a private force main that will serve not just this property, but several others that they use for their steel manufacturing. Police and fire have no additional costs associated with this annexation. Streets will accrue a $12,000 per year maintenance for Northwest 25th Street, so that is also being annexed as part of this. Basically, it's carving out those two single-family homes on the south side. Here we have a concept. Apologies, it's a little tough to see there. So this is roughly 120,000 square foot steel manufacturing building. There's some accessory spaces with that as well, so office, storage, restrooms, things of that nature. There's also going to be a private water line that they are extending off of the main on 25th that will run through this property and also serve some of their other existing sites as well. And again, as I stated, there's a sanitary sewer main to the south that we're going to privately extend to serve this property. And staff recommends that this annexation is consistent with the comprehensive plan. I would take any questions.
Is there any questions for staff? Yes. Commissioner Nager?
Our only decision is annexing, not about the land use, right?
Correct. This is to, basically the finding is that it is consistent or not consistent with the land use and growth management plan.
Thank you.
But is there an application, rezoning application in the works?
There is not. There's not a rezoning for this. It is already zoned for industrial.
But the county has it zoned heavy industrial.
Correct.
So it'll continue with that classification until the city or the applicant or the property owner requests a rezoning.
Correct.
And that most likely would be to I-2.
So it's already zoned either I-1 or I-2. I think it's I-2. In the county, there is this project that is referred to in here, they applied for a building permit to the county so they could proceed, and that's happening. And our role here is we are approving a minor plat, subdivision plat, because we have platting authority, whether this was annexed or not. So we're already in the process of doing that. But our role is not to approve this land use, or at this time, we don't anticipate any need to rezone. It's just strictly to annex it.
Okay, on page 1 of the staff report, under the heading of planning, it says existing zoning I-2 and proposed zoning I-2.
Yep.
Correct. So it's just going to maintain its existing zoning. So just because it's in the county, there's some of those properties.
So there is no application for rezoning put in yet? Okay. Bryson, if I could, the same issue came up last time with annexation, the reference to the township.
Correct.
On page 3. I think it is, I don't want to say misleading, but people might misinterpret that, and I suggest it be deleted.
So I got a little clarification on that, Commissioner. The intent is that for when this memo goes forward to the governing body, they have some type of number that they can tie to what the city is effectively taking property tax-wise away from that township. So that way we are annotating, if there's something else or a different project where there's a very substantial change in property taxes that we may be taking away from a township, the intent is for them to have that information. And I realize it's a little misleading, and maybe there's a different way this could be described there, but the intent is to let them know that that is the revenue that's being taken away from the township.
Well, maybe the language should say that the projected 23,132 upon build-out, if the build-out occurred without the annexation. That's the part that's misleading to me, or not fully explained. That yes, the township would get that, but only if the build-out occurred as proposed and there was no annexation.
Correct. Okay.
And that's a calculation based upon the township levy, the county levy, and so forth. It does not include the city levy, obviously.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Is there any questions from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Or is there any discussion amongst the commissioners?
Madam Chair, I would move that the Planning Commission find that the subject property is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Amanda, will you please take the roll?
Ms. Hannon,
Aye.
Ms. Pearson,
Aye.
Mr. Nager,
Aye.
Mr. Kaut,
Aye.
Ms. Herron. Aye. Ms. Nelson,
Aye.
Mr. Dean.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Were there any other public comments to be noted? Any communication to the commissioners?
Yeah, so really quickly, since we started talking a little bit about the ADUs and the process that is, that's taken over a lot of thorough work by staff, which I appreciate. But talking about the housing study, another thing that just came forward at the last city council meeting, we gave an update on the land bank, which hoping that in June at our meeting, we will take in our first parcels. They're all vacant prime developable lots that were helped to be identified by planning, utilities, and public works. So another exciting thing to start to come to fruition out of the housing study recommendations. Next on that list is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So we are in the middle of staffing that, working with some council members, and then hoping to kick off those meetings in September. So more to come on that. Also wanted to quickly remind everybody that our next meeting on the 15th will be at the Holiday Building. So you will not want to come here for Planning Commission. We'll send out a reminder so you remember that as well. But for the public, you can sign up for public comment, join us at the Holiday Building. We'll be in the first floor conference room.
I have a couple questions. How are the Monroe Neighborhood Design Guidelines coming?
Yeah, so Dan's probably been the one who's been working the closest on that project, but I will tell you that I know that we're working to meet deadlines that are set in place by the project itself. So I believe we were targeting fall. Is that correct? Go ahead.
I can clarify that a bit. So there was a deadline that was given, I think it was September.
Yes, sir.
And that's been relaxed. There's a little bit new information on that. There's also some kind of mixed signals, not the best way to put it, but they're kind of some conflicting information we got about how to approach this. And we're working through some of those questions. And there was somebody that we're working with at the university was on vacation for a while, and that took a while to talk to them. And so that slowed things down a bit, but we're picking that back up, and we'll be bringing that forward.
Okay, thank you. Did the incentives committee meet?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We have a package of incentives put together, or being put together for a slideshow that will go before a selected group of home builders, developers on July 17th. and staff is making the contact for a group. And of course, it'll be an open meeting, so anybody that wants to attend can attend. But the objective, as we've talked about before, is to put these proposed text amendments in front of the people that actually build units and ask them if they think it'll make a difference. And hopefully they'll say, yeah, it will, but if they say maybe yes, maybe no, then we'll try to draw them out and see what else they would like to see, where the stumbling blocks or the obstacles to residential development might be.
Is this part of your discovery phase still, or is it appropriate for the commissioners to see that before you show
We
it else?
have talked about that, and what our preference is, and we can be changed, but our preference would be to have amendments that have been vetted by the development community and by those stakeholders that deal with housing in the community, affordable housing in particular, and Habitat groups like Habitat, and take those refinements. Hopefully we'll get meaningful input, and put those together and have a committee proposal, set of text amendments that'll come before you, and we'll run through those, and if people are happy with them, then we would ask you to schedule it up for a public hearing. If you want us to go back to the drawing board, we'll go back to the drawing board. As told before, my concern is whether we can put enough stuff on the table to really make a difference. And I'm hoping that the matters that we've been talking about, the changes we've been talking about, will be enough. But we need to hear that from the people who actually will, build the structures.
Anyone else on the committee want to say?
Agree with what Commissioner Kopp said, and I've really been pleased at just how thoughtful all the conversations have been. There's been a lot of deliberation and just looking at it from all sides, so I'm just really excited to see the progression moving forward and see what the stakeholders have to say when we meet.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Are we good? All right. I close this meeting, or hit the gavel, or do something. Y'all have a good one.